In this video, I want to go over some common SQL interview questions that I ask. A lot of my clients will have me interview applicants either that they're considering as employees or contractors or just somebody to help out on the project from another team. And so I figured I would share some of the common questions that I ask with you guys. I typically start out with a self-assessment and I'll ask the applicant to rate themselves. On a scale from 1 to 10, tell me what your SQL capability is or what you think it is. And then I'll ask the same question with respect to the database that's being used, whether it's SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, or whatever uh, database that project happens to be using. And I like to do this because I like to measure what the applicant feels their strengths or weaknesses are against their actual. And typically I like to see someone exceed the value that they rate themselves. And I like to see people with confidence, but a little scrutin, I get a little suspicious if someone just rates himself a 10 right off the bat. So then I dig into SQL Basics. I'll ask a question typically to see if the individual can find duplicates. So I say, hey, let's say we have a table containing a last name column. Provide a query that will show the last names that occur more than once and how many times they occur. So this is just a sort of a simple roll up type query. I've got, a potential answer right here where you're going to use the group by construct and having to filter out greater than one. And then I've got an order by here that just orders the results descending. And this is a good question to just kind of get people in the mindset, see if they really understand SQL and group by, especially the group by construct. I have found quite a few people who rate themselves, higher on the higher end of the scale, 6, 7, 8, and they cannot even answer this particular question. So I would definitely brush up on a basic group by if you're going to be doing an interview. And then I've another question I typically ask is, what's the difference between an equi-join and a left join? And I really want to understand if the applicant understands joins and what the differences are between the various types, because it does make a big difference in your queries, and you need to really understand how these various joins work. And then I'll ask, what is a table or view alias in a query? Because I really want to know if they understand how to structure their SQL and how to make things maintainable. And typically, if someone can't answer this type of a query, it really shows me that they really haven't written a lot of SQL, because alias save a ton of time and a lot of space in your in your code as you're writing your SQL. And then I'll ask, I want to understand if the individual understands indexes and how they can help performance. And ideally, they understand how indexes are structured and why they help with performance. So if they really understand the structure and they display an understanding here, it gives me a good feeling that this individual has good fundamental knowledge of how a relational database works. The next area I typically go into is data, basic data loading and unloading. And I want to understand if the applicant can do tasks that involve, loading data into the database and getting data out of the database, and being able to shuttle that data around. And so I'll typically ask, hey, if I give you a spreadsheet to load into SQL Server or Oracle, how would you do it? And typically they're going to use some kind of tool or something like that. And I just want to understand, what level of experience that they have, so that I know that I have assurance that they can perform this task if needed. And then I'll ask about any like difficulties they may run into and how they got past them. And I'll ask the same question with respect to extracting data. So if I needed the results of a query extracted, how would you perform that task? And go through the same sort of process to try and evaluate how much experience they have, what they've had, what sort of problems they've run into, and how they've overcome them. After that, I dig into like real world database experience, and I'll ask questions like, hey, what are the sizes of databases that you've worked with? And you'd be surprised, a lot of people don't even really know. You really need to do a little homework before you go into an interview, and you want to know stuff like this because it doesn't look good if you don't know that you've got a 50 gigabyte database, or if it's a terabyte, or if it's very small and it's 10 megabytes. You really should know this, at least a ballpark figure of what the sizes of the databases are that you're working with. And then I'll ask, how many tables are in the database? That gives me a feel for how much complexity that the individual has worked with in the past. Obviously, if you've got a more complex data model, that exhibits more experience, and you're probably going to bring more to the table with a semi complex project that you're going to have to work on. And then I'll ask, what versions of SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, etc. What versions you've worked with, because you want to be fairly recent. You don't want to be have someone who has worked with technology 20-25 years ago and hasn't really worked with anything newer if you're working with the latest and greatest technology from SQL Server or Oracle or whatever. So that's something that's important to touch on as well. And then I'll ask questions like, I just want to have a feel for if they've run into problems, because contention is a real issue with a lot of databases. And I really want to understand if they run into it before, because if they had, I'm always a little suspicious of what people have actually worked on if they haven't run into contention in the past. And I want to know what sort of things they've had to do to get around them. With SQL Server, there's different ways that you can configure SQL Server so that you can change the locking model that the database is using. Oracle works in different ways where readers don't block writers because of the undo or rollback segments that are in place. So if they understand, these other underlying technologies that the databases are worked on, that always is something that I'm looking for. After that, I'd like to go into some advanced SQL, look at some programming experience, and if the applicant has any data modeling. So I'll ask questions like, have you used analytic functions? And if so, what are some examples? So again, analytic functions, I've got other videos that I cover some of these that include lead, lag, row number, and averages that you can go on subsets of result sets. So analytic functions are very useful, and they really cut down work in some places when you don't have to do programming in order to come up with these answers. You can just use these functions and do it right in SQL inline. And I also ask about CTEs, or common table expression. Again, I have a video on that if you want to check that out. And I ask, if so, what are some examples? I really want to know how they've used CTEs and analytic functions, and I'm interested in how they've applied them. Then I asked if they've coded store procedures in TSQL or PLSQL, or if they've coded functions. And again, if so, describe the experience. Let me know exactly what you've done so I know how deep the experience is that you have and how it applies to the job that we're interviewing you for. And then I'll ask, have you developed a data model? And what tools do you use? And what are some of the basic concepts that you apply? When you're developing a data model, you want to enforce normalization. You want to have primary keys and foreign keys. You want to create indexes. You want to have a solid data model so that your application has a solid basis to work from. And then the last area I focus on is more personal in nature. So I'll ask the individual, what type of position are you looking for? And I want to make sure that the position that they're looking for matches what's being offered. You don't want to offer a position to somebody who that's not what they're looking for. They're not going to be happy, and you're not going to get what you're looking for. And then I'll ask, why are you looking to leave your current position? And again, I want to make sure that the reasons for what they're leaving don't exist in the new position, so that the individual is going to be happy. And then I'll end up usually asking, hey, do you have any questions for me? And I'm looking for some thoughtfulness here, and some research that the individual may have done on the company that they're interviewing with for the position or the project, just to show that they have interest. And they and again, we've got to make sure that what they're looking for is going to be a match with this new position. That'll do it for today's video. I really appreciate you guys watching. I hope that this was something you're looking for. I know that a lot of people are always wondering, hey, what kind of questions am I going to get asked in an interview? So I figured I'd share the things I ask. If you got something out of it, I hope you please like the video. Consider subscribing to the channel. I hope you put some comments and questions below. I'm always looking for new questions from you guys because those are the best ones for the videos. And I hope you share it if you know somebody out there who's about to go in an interview. It might be worthwhile for them to check out and spend a few minutes. Again, questions drop below. I'll talk to you guys later.